Hi, it's Ileana. So today I am going to be going over the seeing UFO sightings in Ukraine as a child. When I was a little girl, I would go out for walks with my grandfather out in the Ukrainian countryside of Kharkov, Ukraine. My parents had a bit of a dacha back in those days in the 1980s that they built themselves. So my granddad and I would go out for walks there, out in the fields and the forest of the countryside. And it was a very beautiful, magical place. And I used to go there as a 3-year-old. And I would see things while we were walking around. Several times I saw different types of crafts. So as a 3-year-old child walking with my grandfather through the woods in Kharkov, Ukraine, we had seen a sighting of a silver-white spacecraft disk and a cylindrical craft flying in the sky in the Ukrainian countryside during the day while we were spending several hours exploring the forest paths out for our daily walks. So the first craft that we had seen was the disc-shaped silver craft, and it was just hovering above us as we were walking one of the forest paths in the countryside. And this was like 30 minutes away from the dacha. And my grandfather was the type of person who was open-minded, so he always encouraged me to look up in the sky, to study everything that's around me, to explore my surroundings, to see what was in the forest, the type of mushrooms, plants. And when I had looked up in the sky, I noticed this round thing hovering, and I asked him, "Grandpa, what is that?" And he said, "That's an unknown mystery that's yet to be solved. I'm not sure what that is, but it's interesting." So he was quite pragmatic about it. He was not so interested in it and looking at it as I was. He just said it's something mysterious that we don't have an explanation for just yet. And I said to him, "Well, it's hovering and it's kind of has this white light shining off of it underneath it. And it's kind of like this shimmery, silvery, metallic thing." He said, "Yes, good observational skills. And it's good to be aware of your surroundings, what's around you, what's above you, to be vigilant and to try to observe things and remember what you see, because these are memories you'll always have with you." And he was right. These are memories that I always have with me, because it's the first ever sighting that I had what I realized is a silver disc UFO. Back then as a child, all I had is the memory. I didn't really have a prosaic explanation what that was, but I did remember what I had seen. So it stayed with me in my mind as a memory, as a mysterious, interesting experience. And this is kind of like another silver craft that sort of looks like a manta ray or a triangular silver disc shaped craft. It wasn't hovering so close on the ground, but the approximation of how I could render it, this is how it came out. It was higher in the sky, but the countryside is exactly like what my grandfather and I were walking through in the field or in the forest. So in the clouds and the trees, just so vibrant. And this silver disc-shaped object flying in the sky and its shadow, we could see that out in the field. So it was very interesting to see that. And it was glinting silver because the sun was out. So we could see the silver of the object and the shadow in the field. So it was another experience on another walk. And one day we had seen two silver-shaped saucers, what was called saucers back then, or discs. And they were just flying above the forest and just slowly flying, not quickly, slowly flying above the forest line, and we could see it from afar. And the sun was glinting off of them. They had this vibrant metallic shimmer, silver shimmer to them. Very beautiful. And it's the same type of a form of the craft, silver disc, that we had first seen, but it was a bit more flatter. These two were a bit more flatter on the top dome. That was the only difference. And one day when we were walking out in the forest, it had been very misty that day, and there was some fog. It might have rained before, and we went after, so it was still misty and foggy. And then there was this UFO craft hovering on our walk as we were walking deeper into the woods. And we would be out for hours on end during these walks. My mom would sometimes worry that we were gone for 3 to 4 hours away from the dacha, because we would go deeper into the forest on these walks, looking for mushrooms, studying plants. My grandfather would teach me about the different kinds of trees in the forest. Again, mushrooms, plants, flowers, trees. And sometimes we'd see these crafts, these silver discs. And he'd always say to me, this is mysteriously interesting, what's in the sky. We should respect whatever that is. And, you know, if it's hovering there, you can look at it a little bit, but don't focus too much on it. Just keep walking. Let's look at all of our surroundings. This is part of the environment, whatever this is, but don't over focus on it too much. And that made me wonder, well, like, why can't I focus on it? Why can't I just look at it for 30, 40 minutes as it was hovering there? He said, let's keep walking. Whatever this is, what this mystery is, one day maybe it will reveal itself, but not right now. And I said, why, Grandpa? What is this? And he said, I don't know. It's a mystery. But let's keep walking. We have other things to look at. So he didn't want me to just focus just on that craft hovering there, whatever it was. He wanted me to take in all of the scenery, including the craft. Not to overspend my time just focusing on it, but other things in my surroundings, in nature. To take it all in. It was part of the environment, yes. It was mysterious, it was interesting, sure. But there were other things. But this image, this particular image in the foggy, misty forest with this silver disc hovering craft, it's been imprinted on my mind since I was 3. I remember it as clear as day, as if I'm walking out in the woods with my grandfather, seeing that all over again. And some of the other craft that I saw were cylindrical shaped, also silver, but larger, and hovering in the sky during the day as my grandfather and I would take our walks in the forest or the fields. And we would go out to the dacha every couple of months in the spring and the summer. So the weather was always good. And we would go out for hours, on these beautiful walks. And we would see some of these larger cylindrical crafts. They were hovering above Ukraine, above forests, tree lines, parks as well, city parks. And so this was like when I was born in 1985, so 86, 87, 88. So this was about in 1988 when I saw these sightings with my grandfather of the silver disc craft and the cylindrical silver and white crafts in the countryside of Kharkiv, Ukraine, not too far from the dacha. And these crafts were pretty large. It would be like 3 baseball fields, I would approximate. Yeah, 3 baseball fields or 3 fields in how large they were for size. They weren't small crafts. The disc silver crafts were smaller. These cylindrical ones were much bigger. And I just remember several types of crafts. And again, it left an impression on me as a little girl. Like, I didn't know what these things were. But there was always an interest to learn more as I got older. But I didn't really think too much of it because, I mean, as a 3-year-old, it's an impression that's left with you. Oh, that's something mysterious and interesting in the sky. But as I got older and started having more experiences in Israel and Canada, seeing more crafts, seeing more things in the sky, starting to have contacts with extraterrestrials, I started to understand what this was. And I guess I was always interested of going back to the 3-year-old, to those memories, and having just some more substantial information with images about what I had seen. So I wanted to sit down as an artist and recreate these scenes of what exactly did I see in the environment, how it happened, the exact types of crafts. So I was able to do the renders of exactly what I saw. And one of the experiences that I had walking with my grandfather as that 3-year-old girl, seeing a white UFO craft hovering above the huge rows of bobbins of cable winches stacked out in the countryside in Kharkiv, Ukraine. This little girl was walking with her grandfather in the forest when she also saw a silver craft. As well as she got to play with goats out on a farm on their way home. Like, I had such experiences with my grandfather that most kids might not have, but I did. I saw another silver disc craft hovering above the tree line on one of the walks, and it was heavily forested, so it was interesting, and it was kind of flashing white yellow light. So that was interesting, and I got to see these huge bobbins of cable winches stacked side by side out in a field, and this white UFO hovering above them. Maybe checking out the scene, like, what are these cable winches doing out in the middle of the countryside? I would think it's for electrical power lines, eventually building poles with power lines. That's what I assumed those cable winches would be there for communication infrastructure. But this was out in the 1980s, 1988. So, it's like kind of in that time frame in Ukraine, like Kharkiv, it was still, they still have black and white TVs. They didn't have color TVs unless you could buy an expensive one. Like, an average family had black and white TV or a radio, not even a TV set. So the fact that as a 3-year-old girl, I saw these large bobbins of cable winches, I was like, wow, there's this white thing hovering above them. I said to my grandfather, "Whoa, Grandpa, this is like amazing. Not every 3-year-old girl gets to see that," and that made the biggest impression on me. So I wanted to recreate that exact scene as I saw it. And this was out in the countryside in the middle of nowhere in the 1980s. So that was quite spectacular for me to see that type of an experience, to have that as an experience. I haven't seen large bobbins of cable winches ever since. Like, one time. I've only seen this one time. And go figure, it was in the heart of countryside in the middle of nowhere, like I said. A once in a lifetime experience with a white UFO hovering above those cables in that cable yard, I guess, out in the countryside. It was just one of a kind memory, I would say, of walking with my grandfather out in the woods and seeing those two things in the environment in particular. And then Grandpa and I would pass the farms, because there was dairy, milking cows, goats, chickens, on the farms in the countryside, and I was allowed to pet the goats, to play with the goats, and my grandfather would watch me as I would play with the goats. As a cute little blonde 3-year-old, the goats loved me. I loved the goats. Still love goats to this day. I have an affinity with animals of all kinds. Goats are my favorite, and I could pet the goats. I could play with them. It was just a magical experience as a 3-year-old. So that was nice. It's not related to UFOs in any way. It's just still a magical experience that I wanted to share here too, because it's part of the magic for me, remembering things as a 3-year-old and to accuracy and degree. Also, as a 3-year-old girl, I had seen a large white cylindrical UFO craft flying above a field in the forest of Kharkiv, Ukraine, in the countryside, while I was walking home with my grandfather. The white cylindrical UFO craft that had the rotating, spinning ring around it, when it materialized into the field where my grandfather and I were walking, it was also large, and it was like a beautiful sunny day, so we could see it above the field. And I would say it was like 3-4 fields large. So it was one of the bigger crafts we had seen, and it was different from the silver cylindrical craft because this one was like really white, and the ring was spinning. The ring wouldn't stop spinning. So it was spinning left to right and right to left, back and forth. I think that's part of how it was phasing in and out from our reality, wherever this craft came from, whether it's man-made or non-man-made. Like, it could be extraterrestrial, most likely man-made, because it did have that white metallic finish on it, and it did seem like it had like seams and stuff, and the rotating ring spinning back and forth. That was the only cylindrical craft that had the ring, the white one. The other cylindrical 2 silver crafts, they didn't have that ring system spinning back and forth as they appeared in the sky and then flew away. But this thing materialized and dematerialized, so it could have had a different propulsion system, a different mechanism of engines or something powering it, but it was just directly above the fields, and we could see its shadow as it phased in and out, me and my grandfather. And it was just an open field away from the forest, and we could see some hills and mountains further out. And we had walked for 3.5 hours to this open field when this materialized. And it was higher, it was much higher above us than what this image shows, but this is as close as an approximation as I could get, with the clouds and the sun around and just a beautiful blue sky where it was hovering above us. And just, to me as a little girl, as a 3-year-old girl, it looked magnificent because I had seen nothing like this particular craft. And it reminded me of just being in a magical space at the time. And I've seen craft like this since, but having seen that as a 3-year-old and just, wondering what is that and why is it rotating and spinning? What is that round thing spinning around it? How is it attached to it? What is manipulating the environment? How does it appear and disappear? It looked like magic to me. I understand it's anti-gravitic technology and probably some kind of a mechanism that warps time and space to allow it to phase in and out from human reality, wherever it came from, because it can manipulate gravity and time and space with that rotating ring. It probably has pulse energy that allows it to create a warp bubble around itself and propel itself in and out from different dimensions in reality. That's how that particular craft likely worked. And it was amazing to see that in the 1980s. As that's not a common thing you see, and especially during the daylight, for a 3-year-old and her grandfather in Kharkov, Ukraine. What was it doing above Ukraine? Who knows, but interesting sighting. And again, these are more common now because they're reverse engineered and man-made from extraterrestrial craft that are not of human origin. So to have encountered this was a special sighting indeed. It's very interesting that cigar-shaped crafts, cylindrical crafts, are what we would call the tic-tac in today's modern era. Call this the tic-tac or cylindrical or cigar-shaped craft, but that was flying above Kharkov, Ukraine in the 1980s, 1988 in particular, during spring and summer. During the day, you could see it with your eyes clearly what the objects were. That tells you something, that these types of crafts were there in the 1980s and possibly 1960s, 70s, 80s, 2000s to present day. This shape of craft is quite popular. It is used even today. Like what was seen during the 2000s when, during the Nimitz incident, 2004 or 2005, circa that year, they'd seen tic-tacs, like white tic-tacs. This is more cylindrical, but similar to the tic-tac that I had seen in broad daylight. Why Ukraine? There could be bases out there potentially. There could be program operations out there where these things were flying, but they were there, and I saw it as a 3-year-old girl. And as a 5-year-old child going to the local city park with my grandmother in Kharkov, Ukraine, we had seen a sighting of a silver UFO disc flying in the sky during the day, so we were walking in the park. My grandfather had passed at that time. This was, I believe, because I was walking with him out in the woods in 1988. So this would have been, as a 5-year-old girl, 89, 90, 1990, when I was 5. And this was a big city park big city park with fountains, walkways. You could see the city in the background of Kharkov. Just clear, beautiful day with sun, some fluffy clouds, and this disc-shaped craft hovering above the park. And when I would look up in the sky, I would see it. And my grandmother, I said, "Look, Grandma, look, what's that?" And she said, "I don't know, sweetie. I don't know what that is. It looks unusual. It's nothing I've ever seen, and it's not an airplane. It's not a helicopter." She's like, "I don't know what that is. It looks interesting, but stop staring at it." She's like, don't make a scene. You can look at it a little bit, but stop staring." She didn't want others to really, like, in the park, to look at us too much, like, why are we staring up in the sky? She was open about it. She allowed me to look at it, and she encouraged me to wonder what it was. But she couldn't answer those questions for me because she didn't know what it was, but she didn't want me staring at it too long because there were other people in the park. So I'd look at it for like a minute and like, oh, that's the mysterious thing I saw when I was walking with Grandpa out in the woods. And I would tell her that, and she's like, yeah, possibly, could be. Yeah, silver disc something, you know. So it was, for me, when we would go out in the park, I would see that disc craft several times. And it's just like, oh, that's just part of what is here in this environment. The fact that it was hovering above the city and above these major parks was interesting, obviously, because other people likely saw it during the day. My grandmother saw it physically, and I saw it. And I'm assuming other people saw it as well, because this silver crafts are quite common. And they're not as large as the cylindrical crafts, but they would hover out in the day, during the day, above these major city parks where people had picnics, where people would go to see the fountain, to enjoy the nice weather, because in the summer it's quite sunny and beautiful out in these city parks, and just see these silver disc crafts in the 1980s in Kharkov, Ukraine. As you wander about looking at the sights of the park, you see a silver disc craft hovering above the trees. That was typical for me as a 5-year-old to see that on my walks in the park with Grandma. And she would say, okay, you can look at it, you can have an impression that there's something there. She would acknowledge there was something there because she could see it as well. Like I said before, she just said, don't loiter around, let's keep walking. As that thing was still hovering there as we kept walking, but I would notice these things in the sky because I used to love watching the sky during the day and at night, looking at the stars. So it was interesting. Now, here in Canada, we have more sightings of crafts at night than during the day. In Kharkov, it was during the day in Ukraine in the 1990s and 1980s, especially as a little girl. So it was a magical time for me, and I had sightings of different crafts, different types, as a 3-year-old and a 5-year-old, so I wanted to share exactly what kind of sightings I had and what impressions they left with me as a child, and the kind of dynamics, a relationship I had with my grandmother and with my grandfather. They were open-minded people that allowed me to explore what was in my surroundings, look up at the sky, walk around in the forest, the park, and explore my surroundings with an open mind and ask questions. What is that? How does that work? Even though they didn't know the answers, they always encouraged me to explore, to try to learn about things and understand what's in my surroundings. And that has stayed with me as an adult. So I'm very grateful for my grandparents and for these wonderful experiences that I had. Thank you so much.